The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain of Kepler 442b as Marcus Chun adjusted his scope for the 100th time that day. The human sniper had been lying in the same position for 18 hours, watching the Zephyrian patrol routes through the valley below. His ghillie suit, woven with adaptive camouflage fibers, made him nearly invisible against the purple-tinged rocks of this alien world. Marcus had volunteered for this mission when the Galactic Empire's recruitment officers came to Earth. They promised adventure, good pay, and the chance to serve alongside dozens of alien species in the greatest military force the galaxy had ever known. What they hadn't mentioned was how little they thought of human capabilities. The Zephyrians controlled this sector, a race of tall, blue-skinned beings with 4 arms and natural armor plating. They had been expanding aggressively into Empire territory, and this forward observation post was crucial for gathering intelligence on their movements. Marcus was supposed to report enemy positions and call in strikes when necessary. Simple enough, except no one seemed to care about his reports. His radio crackled to life. Observation Post 7, this is Command. Status report. Marcus pressed his throat mic. Command, this is OP7. I have eyes on a Zephyrian mechanized column moving through grid reference 445 to 332. 47 vehicles, including what appears to be new heavy artillery. They're setting up defensive positions around the mining facility. A pause. Then, a different voice, clearly annoyed. Human, we have real intelligence sources monitoring this area. Stick to your assigned patrol schedule. The voice belonged to Commander Vexhai, a Corthanian officer with a reputation for dismissing human contributions. The Corthanians were reptilian humanoids who prided themselves on their tactical genius and considered humans to be primitive newcomers to galactic warfare. Sir, with respect, I can see the column clearly. They're bringing in equipment I haven't seen before. This could be significant. Your human eyes are inferior to our surveillance drones and sensor networks. Maintain radio silence unless you're under direct attack. Marcus gritted his teeth but followed orders. This wasn't the first time his reports had been ignored. In his 6 months with the Empire forces, he'd watched his intelligence get dismissed while alien officers made decisions based on incomplete information. The Empire's military doctrine relied heavily on advanced technology and the supposed superior senses of various alien species. Humans were considered useful only as expendable foot soldiers. He continued his observation, making detailed notes in his field journal. The Zephyrian force was larger than the Empire command believed, and their equipment suggested they were planning something big. Marcus could see energy signatures from weapons he didn't recognize, and the way they were positioning their vehicles suggested they expected a major confrontation. As the day wore on, more Zephyrian units arrived. Marcus counted at least 3 full battalions, far more than intelligence estimates suggested. He tried calling it in twice more, only to be told to maintain silence. By evening, he realized the Empire forces were walking into a trap. The attack came at dawn the next day. Marcus watched through his scope as Empire forces advanced into the valley, exactly as their battle plans indicated. The Corthanians were confident their superior technology would easily overwhelm what they believed was a small Zephyrian outpost. The first Empire hover tanks crested the ridge and immediately came under fire from concealed positions. The Zephyrians had dug in during the night, using the very equipment Marcus had tried to report. Energy beams lanced out from hidden bunkers, striking the lead vehicles and sending them crashing to the ground in flames. Command, this is OP7. Marcus called into his radio. The enemy has prepared positions. They're using the new artillery I reported yesterday. Maintain radio silence. Human. Vexai's voice snapped back. We're handling the situation. But they clearly weren't. Marcus watched in horror as Empire forces walked into ambush after ambush. The Zephyrians had prepared for exactly the kind of frontal assault the Corthanians favored. Every advance was met with devastating fire from positions the Empire command insisted didn't exist. Through his scope, Marcus could see Zephyrian snipers taking positions on the far ridgeline. They were targeting Empire officers, and their shooting was devastatingly accurate. Commander Vexhai was down there somewhere, probably still convinced his tactical superiority would win the day. The battle turned into a slaughter. Empire forces were pinned down in the valley with no cover, taking casualties from enemies they couldn't even see. The advanced sensors and surveillance drones the Empire relied on were being jammed by Zephyrian electronic warfare units. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He adjusted his rifle and began picking off the Zephyrian spotters and snipers. His weapon was primitive by galactic standards, a powder-based firearm that most aliens considered laughably obsolete. But it was quiet, accurate, and invisible to the energy-based detection systems the Zephyrians were using. His first shot took out a Zephyrian sniper who had just killed an Empire squad leader. The alien dropped without any of his companions realizing what had happened. Marcus shifted position slightly and took aim at another target. One by one, he began eliminating the enemy marksmen who were devastating the Empire forces. The Zephyrians couldn't understand what was happening. Their snipers were dying silently, with no energy signatures, no muzzle flashes visible to their sensors. Some ancient, primitive weapon was picking them off, and they had no defense against it. Marcus worked methodically, using every skill he'd learned in his years as a competitive shooter back on Earth. The Empire had dismissed his marksmanship as irrelevant in an age of guided energy weapons and smart ammunition. But right now, his primitive skills were the only thing keeping Empire forces from being completely annihilated. After 2 hours of careful shooting, Marcus had eliminated 17 Zephyrian snipers and forward observers. The enemy's coordinated fire began to break down as their spotting network collapsed. Empire forces finally managed to find cover and begin returning effective fire. His radio crackled again. This time it was a different voice, younger and desperate. Any Empire units, this is Lieutenant Kresh with the 43rd Assault Squadron. We're pinned down in grid 440 to 335, taking heavy casualties. Request immediate support. Marcus could see the squad's position through his scope. They were trapped in a shallow depression with Zephyrian forces closing in from 3 sides. The aliens were using their natural armor and superior numbers to overrun the isolated Empire troops. Lieutenant, this is Observation Post 7. I can provide sniper support. Stay low and mark your positions with IR strobes. OP7. I thought that was just a human watching post. Do you have heavy weapons? Negative on heavy weapons, but I can eliminate threats. Trust me. There was a pause. Marcus could imagine the young officer weighing his options. Accept help from a supposedly inferior human, or watch his squad get overrun. Copy that. OP7. We're marking positions now. Please hurry. Marcus went to work. The Zephyrians advancing on the trapped squad never knew what hit them. One moment, they were closing in for the kill. The next, their squad leaders were dropping with precise headshots. Marcus targeted the aliens carrying heavy weapons first, then worked his way through their command structure. The Zephyrians began to panic. They were dying from an invisible enemy, their advanced sensors useless against Marcus's primitive but effective rifle. Some tried to retreat, others sought cover, but Marcus had the high ground and perfect visibility of the entire battlefield. Within 30 minutes, he had broken the attack on Lieutenant Kresh's squad and eliminated the Zephyrian force threatening their position. The young officer's grateful voice came over the radio. OP7, I don't know how you did that, but you saved our lives. What's your unit designation? Just one human with a rifle, Lieutenant. Glad I could help. The battle continued throughout the day, with Marcus providing overwatch for multiple Empire units. Every time a squad got pinned down or threatened with being overrun, his precise shooting would eliminate the key threats and give them a chance to maneuver to safety. But the Empire command structure remained convinced that their high-tech solutions were the answer. Even as Marcus single-handedly turned the tide of several engagements, his reports continued to be dismissed. Commander Vexhai, if he was still alive, would never admit that a primitive human had saved the day where Corthanian tactical genius had failed. As evening approached, the Zephyrians began a tactical withdrawal. They had taken far heavier casualties than expected and lost the element of surprise. The mysterious sniper who had decimated their officer corps had turned what should have been an easy victory into a costly stalemate. Marcus finally allowed himself to relax slightly. His ammunition was running low, and he was exhausted from the day-long engagement. But he had done something remarkable. A single human with an obsolete rifle had held off an entire alien army and saved hundreds of Empire lives. His radio crackled one more time. "All units, this is command. Enemy forces are withdrawing. Well done to all Empire personnel for maintaining tactical superiority despite enemy ambush tactics." No mention of the sniper support that had made the difference. No acknowledgement of the intelligence that could have prevented the ambush in the first place. Marcus shook his head and began preparing for another long night of observation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and he was beginning to realize that he was truly on his own out here. As the alien suns set over the battlefield, Marcus cleaned his rifle and made fresh entries in his log. The Empire might ignore human capabilities, but the Zephyrians were starting to learn that Earth's children were far more dangerous than anyone realized. He settled in for another night of watching and waiting, knowing that tomorrow would likely bring another test of human endurance and skill. The war was just beginning, and Marcus Chun was about to become the Empire's most valuable asset, whether they acknowledged it or not. In the growing darkness, he whispered a promise to his fallen comrades, and the aliens who had dismed 3 days had passed since the battle in the valley, and Marcus had become a ghost story among the Zephyrian ranks. Through intercepted communications, he learned they were calling him the Silent Death, a mysterious enemy who struck without warning and left no trace. What they didn't know was that their Silent Death was running dangerously low on supplies. Marcus had been on his own for 72 hours with minimal rations and no resupply. Empire Command continued to ignore his position reports and supply requests, apparently convinced that a single human observation post wasn't worth the resources. Meanwhile, Zephyrian forces had begun actively hunting for his position after realizing that eliminating him was crucial to their operational success. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. The Empire dismissed him as irrelevant while their enemies considered him their primary threat. He had spent the last 3 days moving between hide sites, never staying in one position for more than 6 hours. His ghillie suit was torn and his equipment was wearing down, but he continued to observe and report enemy movements that no one seemed interested in hearing about. On the morning of the 4th day, everything changed. Marcus was observing a Zephyrian supply convoy moving through a narrow pass when his radio exploded with panic chatter. "Mayday! Mayday! This is Captain Tvar of the Imperial Cruiser Sovereign. We are under attack by unknown vessels. Shields failing. We need immediate assistance." Through his scope, Marcus could see the reason for the panic. The supply convoy he'd been watching wasn't just carrying standard equipment. Hidden among the regular vehicles were sophisticated anti-aircraft weapons and what appeared to be a mobile command center for coordinating space-based attacks. "Command, this is OP-7, Marcus called urgently. "I can see enemy ground control systems for space operations in grid 448 to 340. They're coordinating attacks on our orbital assets." The response was immediate and harsh. "Human, maintain radio silence. We're dealing with a crisis." But Marcus had spotted something else that made his blood run cold. The Zephyrians were setting up what looked like a planetary defense cannon, a massive energy weapon capable of destroying capital ships in orbit. If they got it operational, the Empire's entire fleet in this system would be sitting ducks. He watched through his scope as Zephyrian technicians worked to calibrate the weapon. The process would take several hours, but once complete, they could systematically destroy every Empire ship in orbit. And Empire Command focused on the space battle above, had no idea what was happening on the ground. Marcus made another desperate attempt to reach command. This is OP-7 with critical intelligence. The enemy is setting up planetary defense weapons. Grid reference 448 to 340. They're going to destroy our fleet. Human, you are ordered to maintain radio silence. Your position is irrelevant to current operations. That was the moment Marcus realized he was completely on his own. The Empire would rather lose their entire fleet than listen to intelligence from a human soldier. Fine. If they wouldn't listen to his reports, he would have to handle this himself. The planetary defense cannon was heavily guarded, with at least 2 companies of Zephyrian troops providing security. The weapon itself was massive, requiring precise targeting systems and a substantial power source. Marcus studied the installation through his scope, looking for weaknesses. The power coupling was exposed on the weapon's left side, protected only by an energy shield that would stop incoming fire, but wouldn't stop someone who was already inside the perimeter. The targeting computer was housed in a separate bunker, connected to the main weapon by fiber optic cables running along the ground. Marcus began planning his approach. He would have to get within 50 meters of the installation, eliminate the guards quietly, and then sabotage the weapon before the technicians could complete their calibration. It was a suicide mission for a single soldier, but with the Empire fleet hanging in the balance, he didn't have a choice. As he prepared to move, his radio crackled with a new voice. Young, terrified, and very human. This is Corporal Sarah Walsh, Empire Marine Corps. My unit is pinned down approximately 2 kilometers from a large enemy installation. We've been cut off for 6 hours. If anyone can hear this, we need immediate assistance. Marcus froze. There were other humans on this planet, and they were in trouble. He shifted his scope and began scanning the area around the enemy installation. After several minutes, he spotted them. A squad of human marines trapped in a crash-drop ship, surrounded by Zephyrian forces. The aliens weren't in any hurry to finish them off. They seemed to be using the trapped Marines as bait, hoping to draw in rescue forces that they could ambush. It was a cruel but effective tactic, and one that relied on Empire forces actually caring enough about human casualties to mount a rescue. Based on the radio chatter he'd been hearing, that rescue wasn't coming. The Empire commanders were too focused on the space battle to spare resources for a handful of trapped humans. After all, humans were expendable cannon fodder in their eyes. Marcus found himself facing an impossible choice. He could attempt to sabotage the planetary defense weapon and potentially save the fleet, or he could try to rescue his fellow humans. He couldn't do both. The installations were 2 kilometers apart, and he was just one person with limited ammunition and no backup. He studied both situations through his scope, trying to find a solution that didn't require him to abandon either mission. The Marines were in immediate danger. Zephyrian forces were slowly tightening their noose around the crash site. But the planetary defense weapon would be operational within hours, and once it was active, every human in the system would be doomed. That's when Marcus noticed something interesting. The Zephyrian commander overseeing the planetary defense installation was using the same tactical frequency as the forces surrounding the Marines. If he could eliminate the commander, both operations might be thrown into confusion long enough for him to complete his missions. It was a long shot, but it was the only plan that gave him a chance to save both the fleet and the trapped Marines. Marcus began his approach to the enemy installation, moving carefully through the rocky terrain. His ghillie suit and natural human stealth capabilities made him nearly invisible to Zephyrian sensors. The approach took 2 hours of careful movement. Marcus had to avoid multiple patrols and sensor sweeps, using every trick he'd learned during his training on Earth. Several times, he was forced to lie motionless for minutes as enemy soldiers passed within meters of his position. Finally, he reached a position within range of the installation's command bunker. Through his scope, he could see the Zephyrian commander, a tall alien with elaborate armor markings indicating high rank. The commander was coordinating both the defense weapon deployment and the siege of the Marine crash site. Marcus steadied his rifle and controlled his breathing. This shot had to be perfect. Miss, and he would alert the entire installation to his presence. The range was 800 meters with a crosswind and the target partially concealed behind cover. It was a challenging shot, even under ideal conditions. He squeezed the trigger. The Zephyrian commander dropped instantly, the primitive bullet punching through his sophisticated armor as if it were paper. Immediately, both radio networks exploded with confusion as subordinate officers tried to figure out what had happened and who was in charge. Marcus didn't wait to see the results. He was already moving toward his secondary position, from which he could engage both the planetary defense weapon and provide support to the trapped Marines. The confusion caused by the commander's death had bought him precious time, but it wouldn't last long. His next target was the power coupling for the defense weapon. The technicians were running around in panic, but they hadn't abandoned their posts. If anything, the commander's death had made them more determined to get the weapon operational as quickly as possible. Marcus took careful aim at the power coupling's control panel. The shot had to disable the system without causing an explosion that would kill the human Marines 2 kilometers away. He fired once, then twice, watching through his scope as the massive weapons power systems failed in a cascade of sparks and emergency lighting. The technicians frantically tried to restore power, but Marcus had damaged the primary control circuits. It would take hours to repair, assuming they had the necessary parts. More importantly, the weapon was no longer an immediate threat to the Empire fleet. With his first mission complete, Marcus turned his attention to the trapped Marines. The Zephyrian forces surrounding them were still in confusion following their commander's death, but they were beginning to reorganize under a new officer. If he was going to act, it had to be now. Marcus began picking off the Zephyrian soldiers positioned around the crash site. His primitive rifle continued to confound their sensors, and each shot sent waves of panic through their ranks. Soldiers who had been confidently closing in on the Marines suddenly found themselves under attack from an invisible enemy. Corporal Walsh's voice crackled over the radio, filled with disbelief. "I don't know who's out there, but someone is taking out the aliens around our position. We might have a chance." Marcus continued his methodical elimination of the enemy forces. He targeted officers first, then heavy weapon specialists, then anyone who tried to take command of the increasingly disorganized alien troops. Within 30 minutes, he had broken the siege and cleared an escape route for the Marines. "This is OP-7, he called over the radio. "Marines at the crash site, you have a clear path to the northeast. Move now while the enemy is disorganized." "OP-7, this is Corporal Walsh. Are you the sniper who's been helping us?" "Affirmative. Get your people moving. I can provide overwatch, but you need to move fast." Marcus watched through his scope as the Marines fought their way out of the crash drop ship. Several were wounded, but they moved with the disciplined efficiency of well-trained soldiers. Corporal Walsh was clearly an experienced leader, keeping her people together despite the chaos around them. As the Marines began their withdrawal, Zephyrian reinforcements started arriving at both locations. The aliens had realized that a single enemy sniper was responsible for disrupting both their operations, and they were bringing everything they had to bear on finding and eliminating him. Marcus found himself in an increasingly precarious position. He was running low on ammunition, had no backup, and was facing an entire army that now considered him their primary target. But he had accomplished something remarkable. He had single-handedly prevented a major strategic disaster and saved the lives of his fellow humans. The Empire fleet, still unaware of how close they had come to annihilation, continued their battle in orbit. The trapped Marines were making good their escape, with Marcus providing cover fire whenever Zephyrian forces tried to intercept them. And somewhere in a command bunker, alien officers were trying to explain to their superiors how one human with a primitive rifle had outmaneuvered their entire tactical system. As the day wore on, Marcus realized that his actions had changed more than just the immediate tactical situation. Word was spreading through both armies about the human sniper who struck without warning and seemed to be everywhere at once. The Empire soldiers, initially skeptical, were beginning to whisper about their mysterious guardian angel. The Zephyrians, on the other hand, were developing a healthy respect for human combat capabilities. But Marcus knew this was only the beginning. He had shown that humans could be far more than expendable cannon fodder, but convincing the Empire's leadership would require more than one successful mission. As night fell over the alien battlefield, he prepared for the next phase of his one-man war against an empire that had forgotten the value of human determination and ingenuity. 1 week after the defense cannon incident, Marcus had become a legend on both sides of the conflict. The rescued Marines had spread word about their mysterious savior, and even the alien officers in the Empire forces were beginning to take notice. But with fame came danger. The Zephyrians had deployed specialized hunter-killer teams specifically tasked with finding and eliminating the human sniper. Marcus was down to his last 30 rounds of ammunition and hadn't eaten a proper meal in 5 days. His requests for resupply continued to be ignored, even as reports of his actions filtered up through the ranks. It seemed the Empire leadership would rather pretend he didn't exist than acknowledge that a single human had accomplished what their advanced technology and alien tactical genius could not. The situation changed dramatically when Marcus intercepted a coded Zephyrian transmission. Using the translation software in his field computer, he decoded a message that made his blood run cold. The Zephyrians weren't just planning to take this planet. They were preparing to launch a massive offensive against Earth itself. The intercepted plans revealed a terrifying scope of ambition. Once they secured this sector, the Zephyrians intended to use it as a staging ground for a full-scale invasion of human space. Earth, with its billions of inhabitants, was seen as the perfect source of slave labor for their expanding empire. The planet's defenses, considered primitive by galactic standards, were expected to fall within days. Marcus tried repeatedly to relay this intelligence to Empire Command, but his calls were either ignored or dismissed as human paranoia. Commander Vexhai, who had apparently survived the Valley battle, responded personally to one of Marcus's attempts. "Human, your species has a reputation for emotional overreaction. We have our own intelligence networks. Stick to your observation duties and leave strategic planning to your superiors." But Marcus had seen the evidence with his own eyes. The Zephyrian force buildup was real, and it was massive. Through his scope, he could observe supply convoys arriving daily, carrying weapons and equipment clearly intended for large-scale planetary assault. Troop transports were gathering at hidden bases throughout the sector, and the aliens were constructing what appeared to be jump gates capable of moving entire fleets across vast distances. The most disturbing part was the timeline. According to the intercepted communications, the assault on Earth was scheduled to begin in just 2 weeks. The Empire forces in this sector, still believing they were dealing with a minor border skirmish, had no idea they were looking at the advance guard of a genocidal invasion force. Marcus realized he was facing an impossible situation. A single human sniper couldn't stop an entire alien invasion fleet. But he was the only one who knew what was coming, and the only one in position to do something about it. The question was what a lone soldier could possibly accomplish against such overwhelming odds. The answer came when he observed a high-level Zephyrian planning session through his scope. The alien commanders were meeting in a supposedly secure facility, protected by multiple layers of security and electronic jamming. But their arrogance had led them to hold the meeting in a building with large windows, apparently confident that no enemy could get close enough to observe them. Marcus watched as the Zephyrian War Council laid out their plans on a holographic display. He could see the invasion routes, the target priorities, and, most importantly, the command structure for the entire operation. At the center of it all was Supreme War Commander Zethkul, the architect of the invasion plan and the supreme commander of all Zephyrian forces in the region. If Marcus could eliminate Zethkul, the entire invasion might collapse into chaos. The Zephyrians operated under a rigid hierarchical system, and removing the Supreme Commander would create a power vacuum that could delay the invasion for months while subordinates fought for control. The problem was that Zethkul was protected by the most sophisticated security systems the Zephyrians possessed. Energy shields, automated defenses, and an entire battalion of elite guards made the facility virtually impregnable. Even if Marcus could somehow penetrate the defenses, he would never make it out alive. But as Marcus studied the facility through a scope, he noticed something the Zephyrians had overlooked. Their advanced technology was specifically designed to defend against energy weapons and high-tech assault methods. The shields were calibrated to stop plasma bolts and particle beams. The sensors were tuned to detect advanced military equipment and alien energy signatures. None of their defenses were designed to stop a primitive kinetic projectile fired from an obsolete chemical weapon. Marcus began planning the most audacious shot of his career. The range was over 1,500 meters through multiple atmospheric layers and past several energy fields. The target would be visible for only seconds at a time through the facility's windows. Wind conditions were variable, and he would have exactly one shot before every Zephyrian force on the planet converged on his position. He spent 2 days moving into position, avoiding the hunter-killer teams that were still searching for him. His final hide site was on a mountain ridge overlooking the Zephyrian command facility. It was exposed and offered no retreat route, but it was the only position that gave him a clear shot at the target. On the morning of the planned assassination, Marcus lay prone behind his rifle and waited for the perfect moment. Through his scope, he could see Zethkul moving around the command center, occasionally passing near the large windows that overlooked the valley below. The Supreme Commander's elaborate armor and distinctive height made him easily identifiable even at extreme range. Marcus had to time his shot perfectly. Zethkul would be visible through the window for approximately 3 seconds during his regular circuit of the command center. The bullet would take nearly 2 seconds to reach the target, meaning Marcus had to fire when Zethkul was still moving toward the window, trusting that the alien would be in the right position when the projectile arrived. He controlled his breathing and settled into the familiar rhythm of precision shooting. Everything else faded away. The danger, the impossible odds, the weight of billions of lives hanging in the balance. There was only the rifle, the target, and the mathematical precision required to make an impossible shot. Zethkul approached the window. Marcus squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against his shoulder, sending the primitive lead projectile on its trajectory through the alien atmosphere. For nearly 2 seconds, Marcus held his breath as the bullet flew toward its target, crossing the distance at a speed that made it invisible to Zephyrian sensors. Through his scope, Marcus watched the Supreme Commander's head snap back as the bullet found its mark. The primitive projectile punched through the advanced window materials and sophisticated personal shields as if they didn't exist, delivering a precisely placed shot that dropped the most dangerous military commander in Zephyrian history. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Alarms began wailing throughout the facility as Zephyrian officers rushed to their fallen leader. Security forces deployed in every direction, searching desperately for the assassin who had somehow penetrated their impregnable defenses. But Marcus was already moving. He had planned his escape route carefully, using natural terrain features to mask his movement from the sensor sweeps that would inevitably follow. The shot had been perfect, but now came the hard part, staying alive long enough for the assassination to have its intended effect. As he made his way down the mountain, Marcus could hear the chaos spreading throughout the Zephyrian forces. Radio chatter indicated massive confusion as subordinate commanders tried to figure out who was in charge and what their orders were. The rigid command structure that had made the aliens so effective was now working against them as officers waited for orders that would never come. Marcus reached a hidden cave system he had discovered during his reconnaissance and settled in to wait. Within hours, his radio was filled with intercepted Zephyrian communications that confirmed his success. The invasion of Earth had been postponed indefinitely as Zephyrian faction leaders engaged in a power struggle for control of their forces. But Marcus knew his victory was temporary. Eventually, the aliens would resolve their leadership crisis and resume their expansion plans. The threat to Earth was delayed, not eliminated, and he was still alone on a hostile planet with minimal supplies and an entire alien army hunting for him. What Marcus didn't know was that his actions had finally attracted the attention of someone who mattered within the Empire command structure. Admiral Kestar, a veteran Altarian officer known for his pragmatic approach to warfare, had been analyzing the recent tactical reports from the sector. Unlike his colleagues, Admiral Kestar was more interested in results than species prejudices. He had noticed that every significant Empire success in recent weeks could be traced back to intelligence reports filed by the same human observation post. He had also noticed that these reports were consistently ignored by the sector command staff. The assassination of Supreme War Commander Zethkul was the final piece of evidence Admiral Kestar needed. No advanced technology or alien tactical genius could have accomplished what this human sniper had achieved with primitive equipment and sheer determination. It was time for the Empire to acknowledge what they had in Marcus Chun. As Marcus waited in his cave hideout, monitoring alien communications and planning his next move, he had no idea that his war was about to change dramatically. Help was finally coming, but it would arrive in a form he never expected. The Empire was about to learn the true value of human ingenuity, and Marcus Chun was about to become the most important soldier in galactic history. The hunt for the mysterious sniper intensified as Zephyrian forces scoured every square kilometer of the planet's surface. But Marcus had vanished into the wilderness like a ghost, leaving behind only the legend of the human who had changed the course of an interstellar war with a single, perfectly placed shot. Earth remained safe for now, its people unaware of how close they had come to annihilation and how one of their own had stood alone against an empire to save them all. Admiral Kestar's personal transport dropped from orbit under cover of darkness, its stealth systems making it invisible to both Zephyrian and Empire sensors. The Altarian Admiral had spent 3 days convincing the Sector Command to approve this unprecedented mission, a personal extraction of a single human soldier. Most of his colleagues thought he had lost his mind. Marcus was cleaning his rifle in the cave when he heard the distinctive sound of atmospheric engines outside. He grabbed his weapon and moved to a defensive position, expecting another Zephyrian search team. Instead, he found himself staring at 6 figures in Empire military gear, led by an alien he recognized from intelligence briefings as one of the Empire's most respected fleet commanders. Specialist Chun, Admiral Kestar said in accented but clear English, "I believe we need to talk." Marcus kept his rifle ready, but didn't point it directly at the newcomers. "Sir, if you're here to arrest me for disobeying orders, I should mention that I've eliminated approximately 80 enemy combatants in the last 2 weeks, including their Supreme Commander. I think that might qualify as following orders to engage the enemy." The Admiral's mandibles clicked in what Marcus had learned to recognize as Altarian amusement. "On the contrary, Specialist, I'm here to offer you a promotion and the resources to do your job properly." Marcus lowered his rifle, confused. "Sir, I've been reviewing your reports, all of them. The tactical assessments, the intelligence on enemy movements, the warnings about the planned invasion of Earth. Every piece of information you've provided has proven accurate. Every piece of intelligence you've provided has been ignored by my colleagues." Admiral Kestar gestured to the other figures with him. "I'd like you to meet your new team. Lieutenant Commander Vashti is my intelligence specialist. Sergeant Major Cordan is a demolitions expert. The other 3 are communications specialists, medical support, and a supply coordinator. They all volunteered for this mission after I explained what you've accomplished here." Marcus looked at the assembled group, still trying to process what was happening. "Sir, I appreciate the gesture, but I work alone. No offense to your people, but humans operate differently than other species. I'm not sure how effective a mixed unit would be. That's exactly why I'm here, Specialist, the Admiral replied. You've proven that human tactics and capabilities have been vastly underestimated. I want to see what you can accomplish with proper support and resources. Lieutenant Commander Vashti, a sleek-necked Sarian with natural camouflage abilities, stepped forward. Specialist Chen, I've been analyzing your tactical reports for the last week. Your methods are unlike anything in our standard doctrine, but they're incredibly effective. I'd like to learn from you. Sergeant Major Cordan, a massive Thurian built like a walking tank, added his own thoughts. I've studied your assassination of the Zephyrian commander. The precision required for that shot is beyond anything I've seen in 30 years of warfare. My people would be honored to serve alongside you. Marcus found himself in the surreal position of having alien soldiers asking to serve under his command. After weeks of being dismissed and ignored, he was suddenly being treated as a valuable tactical asset. It was almost too much to process. Sir, Marcus said to Admiral Kestar, what exactly are you proposing? A new unit designation, Special Operations Team Alpha. Your mission will be to operate behind enemy lines, gathering intelligence, and conducting precision strikes that conventional forces cannot achieve. You'll have full tactical autonomy and direct communication with Fleet Command. The Admiral paused, his expression becoming more serious. But first, we need you to confirm your intelligence about the invasion plans targeting Earth. If you're right, this conflict is far larger than anyone realized. Marcus activated his field computer and displayed the intercepted communications he had decoded. Sir, the Zephyrians are building a massive invasion fleet in hidden bases throughout this sector. They're planning to use Earth as a slave labor source for their expanding empire. The assassination of Zeth Kull has delayed their timeline, but hasn't stopped their preparations. Lieutenant Commander Vashti studied the data, her large eyes processing the information quickly. These communication intercepts, how did you decode them? Our intelligence services have been trying to break Zephyrian encryption for months. I used pattern analysis and frequency mapping, Marcus explained. Human brains process information differently than most alien species. We're good at finding patterns in seemingly random data. Vashti was fascinated. Could you teach this technique to our intelligence specialists? Probably, but it would take time to adapt the methods for different cognitive structures. Each species thinks differently. Admiral Kestar interrupted the technical discussion. Gentlemen, ladies, we can discuss methodology later. Right now, I need to know if these invasion plans are still viable. Specialist Chun, what's the current status of enemy forces? Marcus led the team to his observation position overlooking the valley. Through his scope, magnified and displayed on a portable screen for the others to see, they could observe the Zephyrian installations he had been monitoring for weeks. The command structure collapsed after Zeth Kull's death, but they're already reorganizing under General Vorthke, Marcus explained. He's more cautious than his predecessor, but just as committed to the invasion plan. They've increased security around their key installations and deployed additional hunter-killer teams to search for me. Sergeant Major Cordan studied the enemy positions through his own equipment. Those defensive positions are well constructed. A conventional assault would require at least a full brigade and result in heavy casualties. That's why we're not going to attack them conventionally, Marcus replied. The Zephyrians have adapted to Empire tactics. They expect frontal assaults with heavy weapons and coordinated strikes. They're not prepared for human-style asymmetric warfare. Marcus outlined his plan to the assembled team. Rather than attacking the enemy installations directly, they would focus on disrupting the invasion preparations through a series of precisely targeted strikes. Cut the supply lines, eliminate key personnel, and create enough chaos to force the Zephyrians to abandon their timeline. The plan was audacious and relied heavily on the unique capabilities of each team member. Vashti's natural camouflage would allow her to infiltrate enemy positions for intelligence gathering. Cordan's demolitions expertise could destroy key infrastructure without the massive firepower that would alert enemy forces. The support specialists would provide communications, medical aid, and supply coordination that Marcus had been lacking. Admiral Kestar approved the plan with one modification. I'm assigning you a direct link to Fleet Command. When you identify targets that require orbital bombardment, you'll have immediate access to the firepower you need. Over the next 6 hours, the team prepared for their first coordinated mission. Marcus found himself in the strange position of training alien soldiers in human tactics. Each species brought their own strengths to the team, but they had to learn to think like humans to be effective. The key to human tactics, Marcus explained, is adaptability and unpredictability. Most alien military doctrines focus on technological superiority and rigid command structures. Humans learned warfare on a planet where we were constantly outmatched by larger, stronger, faster predators. We survived by being smarter, more flexible, and more willing to take calculated risks. Vashti absorbed this information quickly. So human warfare is based on cognitive superiority rather than physical dominance. Exactly. We use our brains to level the playing field. Sometimes it means advanced technology. Sometimes it means going back to primitive methods that the enemy doesn't expect. Their first target was a supply depot that fed the main Zephyrian base. Rather than destroying it outright, they planned to contaminate the supplies in a way that would cause equipment failures throughout the enemy force. Cordan had developed a compound that would degrade Zephyrian electronics without being immediately detectable. The mission went flawlessly. Vashti infiltrated the depot using her camouflage abilities, while Marcus provided overwatch from a concealed position 2 kilometers away. The contamination was subtle but devastating. Within 48 hours, critical systems began failing throughout the Zephyrian force. The enemy response was exactly what Marcus had predicted. Instead of suspecting sabotage, they assumed their equipment was suffering from environmental factors on the alien planet. They began demanding replacement supplies and technical support, straining their logistics network and delaying their operational timeline. Admiral Kestar monitored the mission from orbit, watching as human tactics achieved results that conventional Empire forces had been unable to accomplish in months of fighting. For the first time, he began to understand why the Zephyrians had been so successful against Empire forces. They had adapted to fight Empire technology and tactics, but they had no defense against human ingenuity. The success of the first mission led to more ambitious operations. Marcus and his team began systematically dismantling the Zephyrian invasion infrastructure, using a combination of precision strikes, psychological warfare, and technological sabotage that left the enemy confused and demoralized. But their success also attracted unwanted attention. General Vorthake realized that someone was conducting a sophisticated campaign against his forces, and he began deploying countermeasures specifically designed to deal with covert operations. The hunter-killer teams became more aggressive, and the Zephyrians began using their own specialists in unconventional warfare. The real test came when Marcus intercepted communications indicating that the Zephyrians had identified Earth's location and were preparing a preliminary strike force to test human defenses. Despite all their setbacks, they were still committed to their invasion plan and were willing to risk a smaller force to gather intelligence about Earth's capabilities. Marcus knew that this advanced force had to be stopped completely. If even one Zephyrian ship reached Earth and returned with intelligence, the full invasion would follow inevitably. This was the moment when his war would determine the fate of his entire species. Admiral Kestar authorized full fleet support for the mission, but Marcus knew that conventional tactics would fail. The Zephyrians had learned to expect Empire responses and had planned accordingly. Only a completely unexpected approach would catch them off guard and prevent the reconnaissance mission from reaching Earth. As Marcus and his team prepared for their most critical mission, they were unaware that word of their success had reached the highest levels of Empire command. Politicians and military leaders who had dismissed human capabilities were being forced to reconsider their assumptions. A single human soldier and his small team had accomplished more in 3 weeks than entire alien divisions had achieved in months. The fate of Earth and possibly the entire empire now rested on the shoulders of a species that had been written off as primitive and expendable. Marcus Chun and his team were about to prove that sometimes being underestimated was the greatest tactical advantage of all. The Zephyrian Advance Fleet was scheduled to launch in 6 hours. Marcus and his team had identified their target, a heavily fortified spaceport where 12 assault ships were being prepared for the reconnaissance mission to Earth. The facility was protected by energy shields, automated defenses, and 3 battalions of elite Zephyrian troops. According to Empire doctrine, it would require a full-scale orbital bombardment to neutralize. Marcus had a different plan. "We're going to walk in through the front gate," he announced to his team as they studied the facility from their concealed observation post. Sergeant Major Cordan's massive frame seemed to deflate. "Specialist, I respect your tactical abilities, but that facility is impregnable. Even with Admiral Kestar's fleet support, a direct assault would be suicide. That's why we're not going to assault it," Marcus replied. "We're going to convince the Zephyrians to destroy it themselves." Lieutenant Commander Vashti's skin shifted to a confused pattern of colors. "I don't understand. How do we convince an enemy to destroy their own strategic assets?" Marcus smiled grimly. "By giving them something they want more than those ships, revenge against the human sniper who's been humiliating them for weeks." The plan was audacious even by human standards. Marcus would reveal himself to the Zephyrian forces, allowing them to track him to a location of his choosing. The aliens, desperate to eliminate their tormentor, would pursue with overwhelming force. At the crucial moment, Marcus would lead them into a trap that would use their own weapons against the spaceport. "You're proposing to use yourself as bait," Admiral Kestar observed when Marcus outlined the plan over their secure communication link. "The risks are enormous." "Sir, the risks of letting those ships reach Earth are even greater," Marcus replied. "If the Zephyrians gather intelligence about our home planet's defenses, nothing will stop the full invasion. My life is a small price to pay for the safety of 8 billion humans." The Admiral was quiet for a moment. In the weeks since meeting Marcus, he had developed a deep respect for human tactical thinking and moral courage. "Very well, Specialist. You have full authorization for this operation. But I'm keeping the fleet in position to provide support if needed." Marcus spent the next 3 hours preparing for what might be his final mission. He recorded messages for his family back on Earth, updated his tactical logs for future reference, and made peace with the probability that he wouldn't survive the next day. His team members, despite their alien physiology, seemed to understand the solemnity of the moment. "Specialist," Vashti said quietly, "I want you to know that serving with you has changed how I think about warfare. Human methods are unlike anything we've encountered before." Cordan nodded agreement. "Your species may lack our physical advantages or technological sophistication, but your cognitive flexibility is remarkable. You find solutions where others see only problems." Marcus was touched by their words, but he remained focused on the mission ahead. "If I don't make it back, I want you all to remember what we've learned here. Human tactics work because we're willing to think outside established patterns. Share that knowledge with your people. It might save lives in future conflicts." As dawn approached, Marcus moved into position for the most dangerous gambit of his career. He had chosen a location 3 kilometers from the spaceport, where the terrain would channel pursuing forces into a narrow canyon. At the far end of the canyon was an abandoned Zephyrian ammunition depot that Cordan had rigged with enough explosives to level a small city. Marcus began his deception by making himself visible to Zephyrian patrols. After weeks of being an invisible ghost, he suddenly appeared in the open, taking deliberate shots at enemy positions before retreating in an obvious pattern. To the frustrated Zephyrians, it looked like their tormentor was finally making a mistake. The response was immediate and overwhelming. General Vorthicke himself took command of the pursuit, deploying 2 full battalions of elite troops and heavy armor to finally corner the human sniper who had caused them so much trouble. They followed Marcus's trail with grim determination, certain that this time there would be no escape. Marcus led them exactly where he wanted them to go. He moved through the terrain at a pace that kept him just ahead of his pursuers, occasionally stopping to fire a shot or two before continuing his retreat. To the Zephyrians, it looked like desperation. In reality, it was precise choreography designed to position enemy forces exactly where they would do the most damage. As the pursuit force entered the canyon, Marcus activated his communication link to Admiral Kestar. Admiral, this is Special Operations Alpha. I'm in position for Phase 2. Request immediate orbital strike on my coordinates in 60 seconds. Specialist, those coordinates show your location. You'll be at ground zero for the bombardment. Understood, sir. The mission requires it. What Admiral Kestar didn't know was that Marcus had prepared for this contingency. Deep in the canyon wall was a cave system that would provide protection from the orbital strike, if he could reach it in time. But first, he had to ensure that the Zephyrian forces were positioned correctly for maximum effect. Marcus reached the ammunition depot with his pursuers close behind. General Vorthicke's troops spread out through the canyon, finally, confident that they had their target cornered. The general himself moved to within sight of Marcus, apparently wanting to personally confirm the death of the human who had disrupted his plans. Human sniper, Vorthicke called out in accented English. You have caused much trouble for my forces. But now you die, and my ships will still reach your homeworld. Marcus raised his rifle and fired one last shot, deliberately missing the general by inches. It was a gesture of defiance that enraged the Zephyrian commander and drew his entire force into the perfect killing ground. Then Marcus dove for the cave entrance as the orbital bombardment began. The kinetic strike from Admiral Kestar's flagship arrived exactly on schedule, slamming into the canyon with the force of a small asteroid. The impact triggered Cordan's explosives in a cascading chain reaction that turned the entire canyon into a furnace of destruction. The explosion was visible from orbit and registered on seismic sensors across the continent. When the dust settled, General Vorthicke and his entire pursuit force had been vaporized. But the real target hadn't been the troops in the canyon. It had been the spaceport 3 kilometers away. Marcus's calculations had been precise. The explosion sent a shockwave through the planet's crust that reached the spaceport's foundations just as the facility's shields were recalibrated to protect against the orbital bombardment. The timing created a resonance effect that amplified the ground shock, turning the Zephyrians' own defensive systems into a destructive force that tore the facility apart from within. All 12 ships of the advanced fleet were destroyed, along with the infrastructure needed to launch similar missions. The Zephyrian invasion of Earth had been delayed indefinitely, possibly forever. Marcus emerged from his cave battered and deafened, but alive. His team was waiting for him at the extraction point, their relief obvious despite their alien features. Admiral Kestar's personal transport arrived within minutes, ready to evacuate the team that had accomplished the impossible. Specialist Chun, the Admiral said as Marcus was helped aboard, you've just prevented the destruction of your homeworld and possibly saved the Empire itself. How does it feel to be the most important human in galactic history? Marcus was too exhausted to appreciate the magnitude of what had happened. Sir, I was just doing my job. One shot, one kill. That's what we do. But as they flew toward the Admiral's flagship, Marcus began to understand that his actions had implications far beyond this single mission. Word of the human sniper and his alien team was spreading throughout both the Empire and Zephyrian forces. Military leaders on both sides were being forced to reconsider their assumptions about human capabilities and the value of unconventional tactics. Over the following weeks, Marcus found himself at the center of a military revolution. Admiral Kestar had documented every aspect of his operations, creating a comprehensive study of human tactical methods that was distributed throughout the Empire fleet. Alien officers who had previously dismissed humans as inferior began requesting human advisors and specialists. The Empire's military doctrine underwent massive reforms, incorporating human concepts of adaptability, psychological warfare, and technological improvisation. Training programs were established to teach alien soldiers how to think like humans, while human recruits were given positions of authority that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. Marcus was promoted to Major and given command of the new Human Integration Division, tasked with developing hybrid units that combined human creativity with alien technological capabilities. His team became the prototype for a new kind of warfare that would dominate conflicts throughout the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire, meanwhile, began a slow retreat from their expansionist policies. The loss of their invasion fleet and the death of their key leaders had created internal conflicts that prevented further aggression. More importantly, their intelligence services had finally grasped the true nature of human capabilities, leading to a grudging respect for Earth's children. But perhaps the most significant change was in how humans saw themselves within the galactic community. No longer were they considered primitive newcomers suitable only for manual labor and cannon fodder. Marcus Chen's actions had proven that human cognitive abilities were not just equal to those of other species, but, in many cases, superior. Earth itself underwent rapid militarization as the government realized how close they had come to annihilation. The planet's defenses were upgraded with the latest Empire technology, and human tactical innovations were incorporated into the defense plans. Never again would Earth be vulnerable to surprise attack. Marcus returned to his homeworld as a hero, but he remained focused on the larger implications of what had happened. In interviews and speeches, he emphasized that his success had been possible only because humans thought differently from other species. Their supposed disadvantages, lack of natural armor, inferior senses, primitive technology, were actually strengths when applied correctly. We survive on Earth by being smarter than everything that tried to kill us, Marcus told a gathering of military leaders from across the galaxy. We can survive in space the same way. The universe is full of species that are bigger, stronger, and more advanced than we are. But none of them think like us, and that's our advantage. Years later, as Marcus looked out from his office window at the bustling spaceport where human and alien ships worked together in perfect harmony, he reflected on how much had changed since those lonely days on Kepler 442b. The galaxy was still a dangerous place, but humanity now had its proper place among the stars. The Empire had learned that diversity of thought was as valuable as diversity of species. The Zephyrians had learned that underestimating an opponent was a fatal mistake. And humans had learned that sometimes being ignored by your allies could be the greatest advantage of all. Marcus Chun, the sniper in distress who had been ignored by his superiors, had changed the course of galactic history with nothing more than primitive weapons, human ingenuity, and the willingness to take impossible shots when everything was on the line. His legacy would live on in the tactical manuals, training programs, and strategic doctrines that bore his name. But to Marcus himself, the most important legacy was simpler. He had proven that when humans were pushed to their limits and ignored by those who should have supported them, they could accomplish miracles that no advanced technology could match. One human, one rifle, one perfect shot when it mattered most. That was the human way, and the galaxy would never forget it.